breaking barriers and bridging the gaps between patients and doctors. Welcome to Brainstorming with the Docs and your co-hosts, Dr. Glenn Harrison and Dr. Kolby Condos.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of Brainstorming with the Docs. I'm Dr. Kolby Condos, my co-host across the screen, Dr. Glenn Harrison. So
Hey,
today,
Dr. Kolby.
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing well.
It's been a hot minute. Yeah, I don't know about a hot minute. It's been pretty dang cold here, but
Yeah, not as cold here, but we'll get it. We'll get about 8 feet of snow one morning or something like that.
You just had to rub it in just that little bit, didn't you? Oh, it's not that bad here yet, but yeah, it's bad here. So,
I bet a lot of people this morning where you are, because it cooled off. I bet they're cuddling around their great big warm bowl of oatmeal and saying how nice and warm it is and how healthy it is and how hearty it is and all the health benefits. Right?
Have a little bit of cream of wheat.
Yeah. Kind of
So
sticks
good.
to your ribs, as they say.
Yeah, really does. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Maybe not necessarily the most positive way, though.
That's right. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
That's right. So today we are going to discuss the topic of that we get a lot in our office is, hey, doc, are whole grains good for me? Like, I'm eating all of these different types of breads and everything. I switched to whole wheat. Is that pretty good for me or no? What should I be doing? So today we're going to break it all down for you. We're going to talk about, why it may not be as good as maybe we once thought it was. What are some pros associated with it, but then also what are some of the negatives associated with as well.
Mm-hmm.
This is your first time listening or watching, and you have questions on your own health or other health care conditions, be sure to turn on the like and subscribe, turn on notifications so when a new episode rolls out, you get that, because we do break down a lot of stuff on this channel. And if you get value from it, share it with others so they can listen to it as well. But to get started on it, today's topic, are whole grains killing you? Yes,
and maybe yes, or a little bit of no.
Yes, and most likely yes.
So why is this topic important? I know you get the question in the office all the time. A lot of people come in to me and they actually want to tell me how great they're doing in their diet, and they're telling me about how much, the massive quantity they're consuming of whole grains, not just grains, but whole grains, whole grain bread. It's really dusted with, the silver lining of how amazing it is.
Yeah, so, it's the whole thing, right? It's got to be better for you if it's whole, right?
That's right. So why is it important?
Well, I think that traditionally when you look at the standard American diet, that has been a staple for a lot of years. And I think that some of it comes down to agriculture. We do have like one of the most fertile places in North America. When you look at the middle part of the country, the breadbasket, they're able to produce grains really, really quickly and efficiently, and they get a lot of it. So I think that part of it comes down to availability. It's really available. It's really easy for us to grow. It's really, really easy to cook and bake with. So I think that that's part of it. I think that part of the other questions that people have is that, some new information is starting to come out, but it goes against what they've learned since they were in grade school. Everyone remembers the food pyramid, or at the bottom, it was like whole grains and this and this and this. And as we move up, well, now they've changed it a little bit. So people are like, I don't know. What is this all about? I think that because we've eaten away like such a way for so long, it's hard to kind of go against what we thought. It's difficult to go against the grain, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a good pun there. So, but yeah, I think it's difficult because we're so conditioned to eat and see people eat a certain way that when you start to challenge that a little bit, people have questions about it.
Well, it's completely ingrained in our minds.
Oh, right? Man, that was even better than I used.
So it really is. And it's like, how do you eat this piece of tomato and this slice of ham and this leaf of lettuce if you don't have whole grain bread holding them together? You just can't eat that food. It has to be between.
Yeah, it's got to be sandwiched.
Yeah, everything's got to be sandwiched. So we live in a sandwich culture, or a hamburger culture, however we want to put it. So yeah, I totally agree. It turns into a whole mindset. And what's fueled that mindset is conventional wisdom. Like the food pyramid is one, but then we have major organizations like the American Heart Association, putting their stamp on whole grains like it is the healthiest thing in the planet for health. We have the American Diabetic Association labeling diets high in whole grains to help control diabetes. And I get people coming in every day, and I tell you, and I know it's the same with you, Dr. Kolby, it's like your blood is boiling, you're mad, your fists clench, and your palms get sweaty, and you're just waiting to explode on that poor patient that thinks that they're doing such a great thing.
Well, and they're trying, right? They're just doing what they've been taught. So it's like a double-edged sword, because I'm like, there's a lot we could be doing. But then B, I'm like, okay, on the other side, at least they are making that implementation, and they're willing to make dietary changes. So yeah, it's an interesting conundrum to be in, for sure, because you're like, you're so frustrated, but at the same time, you're like, well, at least they're trying.
Mm-hmm. They're following some guidance. It's just, it's not the right guidance. That's right. An old way of thinking. That's an old way of thinking. So since we've been butchering it, Dr. Kolby, what are some of the benefits of these whole grains we've just demonized?
Sure. I mean, they do have their use. I mean, they have their places, right? And they do have their benefits. I think that you look at a lot of why the American Heart Association kind of put their stamp of approval on it is because when you look at one of the ways that the body removes cholesterol from it is that it is often bound in fiber as it moves throughout your intestinal tract, right? So cholesterol gets trapped in this fiber and it gets excreted when you have a bowel movement. So that's one way that it can maybe be beneficial. It also helps to regulate bowel regularity a little bit because of the fiber, helps to move out boluses of food. It does provide, in some instances, I don't remember off the top of my head exactly which whole grain it is, but they do have some short chain fatty acids in there. So actually, we talked about this in another podcast about the importance of short chain fatty acids for maintaining gut energy levels and helping with biodiversity in the gut. I'll put a link in the description when I go back through so I can remember which podcast that was. But those are two benefits that they do have, and it's easy to get and cheap. Yeah.
So I guess there are some benefits, Dr. Kolby. I know when we really dig deep, into the grain, I think we're wearing it out. So we better move on here. So there are some cons, and I think everybody listening to this can see how excited I am to talk about the problems of it. Gluten is one, and we have a podcast on gluten. We talked all about gluten, the why. But for those of you who haven't, listened to that podcast or familiar with gluten, to summarize it, it's a common immune irritant, and it also is hard to digest, very hard to digest. So if you can't digest it, it adds inflammation, and it'll aggravate any existing inflammatory or autoimmune condition. So by removing grains, you avoid this gluten substance. Another major one, and I know you and I talked about it before, but creating blood sugar problems. So these grains, they turn into sugar in your blood, and sugar is the root of all health problems. Too much sugar, you end up with this roller coaster of blood sugar spikes and crashes. So it plays into energy crashes after meals, food comas, sweet cravings, and weight gain. It just turns this whole problem, it turns on, and grains are largely responsible for this, but not so much the grains, but the quantity we're consuming in our modern Western world, especially. It's every meal, most of the meal. It's not the way humans were designed. Primitive humans of picking a little bit of quinoa on a prairie, when the season's right and everything is just perfect. It's just turning into the staple of the American diet. So those are two big ones that I absolutely hate, that grains cause a problem with. The third one is the way our conventional, our commercial agriculture, what's happened, commercially grown, and it's almost all commercially grown now, and it's the chemicals. So it's very hard to avoid these grains if you don't have avoid the chemicals that are found in the grains. And the most common one that many people are aware of is Roundup, the chemical Roundup, and the active ingredient is glyphosate. And this glyphosate, it's seen to play many problems. Right now, at the time of this podcast, there's major lawsuits going on over the health effects, even carcinogen or cancer-causing effects of glyphosate. So, we talk about whole grains. We've changed them significantly since the onset of human history. We've altered them, we added chemicals, and now we're consuming them in massive abundance that humans aren't designed for. I know there's a couple other pieces like mimicry and things like that. Do you want to jump into that, Dr. Kolby?
Yeah, for sure. So the molecular mimicry portion of it, we've actually covered in a previous podcast too. I think it was the Thyroid podcast. So I will actually put a link to that as well. But what it is it basically looks really, really similar to some of the proteins that are within our own body. And when you get your immune system is exposed to this protein that they see as a potential antigen or something that's going to cause an infection, might be a virus or a bacteria, whatever it thinks it is, and it starts making antibodies. Well, what eventually can happen is that your immune system loses its sensitivity and it loses its specificity. And you start making antibodies to your, man, it's late. I'm just hoping it sounds good. Right. So you start making antibodies to your own tissue, and that's when you can have autoimmune flares, which then can be compounded by the fact that you're having big blood sugar surges. You're exposing yourself to more potential pathogens and the chemicals that's sprayed on it. So it's kind of like the perfect storm if you are an unhealthy individual. And then the other part where you talked a little bit about like the hybridization and the genetic modification of it. Basically, we'll just talk about wheat, for instance. It really largely was unevolved for years and years and years, until basically around the 1950s when, people with good intentions decided that they were going to try to end a lot of the world hunger, and they were going to make some form of food which could grow in a broad variety of climates, was really resistant to drought and flood, and could feed a lot of people. So what they ended up doing was they actually genetically modified wheat, which is what we see, on the side of the road. So when you see the wheat that's like, that tall, that's not what actual wheat should look like. Wheat that hasn't been hybridized is actually about 3 feet tall. And when you look at this is dwarf wheat, and all of that has been genetically modified. So when you're driving through, portions of the Midwest and you see it off the side of the road, that's all been genetically modified. And that comes with its own particular set of complications, I guess you'd say. Then that's when you are starting to get more proteins that weren't there before. That's when you start to get a lot of that molecular mimicry, because all of a sudden all these proteins that weren't normally found in this substance are being found now as a result of hybridization and genetic modification. That's when you can start to get a lot of the autoimmune effects of it as well.
Yeah. So to summarize, there's a lot going on with grains than the original grain was, the quantity we consumed, and now with our sedentary lifestyles that we're graining ourselves to death, literally, and it's creating. So are they killing us? I think if we're consuming enough of them, they are. I'd be very, very frank to say they are, and they're killing us a lot faster. If we are dealing with inflammatory conditions, chronic illness, these grains will make it worse if we're consuming enough of them. They're also, if we have blood sugar problems like the diabetics, the pre-diabetics, and people with cardiovascular disease and risks. Cardiovascular disease is a lot more than cholesterol. There's another podcast we can reference here. We talked about cardiovascular disease, and it's more than just cholesterol. You add blood sugar, high blood sugar, and blood sugar ups and downs from grains. You just signed your death warrant if you already have a risk of cardiovascular disease. That's why I thought it was absolutely madness when we see diabetics coming in and they're so proud they're following their doctor's rules of eating whole grains all the time. And I was like, well, where's the disconnect? What happened? So hopefully people are able to get some information out of this, and we have to look at foods differently than we did, 100 years ago. Even when did the hybridization? You gave it.
So the 50s, yeah, even since the 50s.
Yeah, so things have changed a lot in the 50s. So just since the 50s. So I think we've we probably butchered grains a lot more than we promoted them, but that's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, we're
entitled to our opinion, right? That's why everyone's here.
That's right.
So if this was your first time listening or watching and you enjoyed it, got some value out of it, share it with your friends and loved ones. The more people we can reach, the better. And stay tuned, because we're going to do, I'm sure we'll come up with something.
We have a lot.
Not diet related probably next time.
Maybe not.
So stay tuned. And until next time, I'll talk to you later, buddy.
All right.